certain things like the liminal spaces, for example. I would stare at like, when other friends are like talking and stuff, I'd be staring at like different parts of different rooms and kind of just observing the lights and little things too, like, how dust would sort of float in through a white and golden hour. Like, I have a few things that kind of stuck in my brain, like visually during those times.
Welcome to the Fine Fruit Roll, a platform dedicated to the discussion and exploration of art and the creative process. I'm your host, Aaron S., and today's episode is the second part of my conversation with Ryan Taylor. If you haven't heard the first part, please go back to last week's episode before continuing. Thank you very much. One of Ryan's most popular bodies of work is the Dead Mall series, which features an ongoing collection of abandoned and derelict places, which touches upon the genre of liminal spaces. It's kind of one of the most popular bodies of work. Like, what kind of started this series, and kind of what has the reception been like for that?
Yeah, so I don't quite remember what started it. I remember what my first Dead Mall photo was, and I didn't take it with the intention of it being a Dead Mall photo. It was in a place called the Rishabakta. It was in Rishabakta. I don't know the name of the mall. It's hardly a mall. It was just a photo of a kind of blank space, and I just thought it looked really interesting. And I posted it, and it wound up being one of my, at the time, best received posts. I was like, oh, hang on. And then I posted the Dead Mall subreddit, and they took to it. And I was like, all right, I'll shoot the Shediac Mall, which is a place near me. It's a totally dead little mini mall. So I shot that, again, did really well on Reddit. That one got picked up by CBC Arts, did a little interview with them. And CBC Radio actually did an interview with me as well. I don't know if that got aired, but and then CTV Atlantic. These are all like local news things. Arts is Canada-wide, but after all that, like, sort of, I don't call it publicity because, I mean, it's pretty minor, but I was like, all right, I'm just going to continue with this because I like doing it. I just didn't think it would do well. And now I have a backlog right now of Dead Malls because I moved it to my Backroom Spectre accounts, which,
Yes.
So the reason for that name is because I was just trying to make a name on Tumblr, like a username on Tumblr,
Of course, yeah.
and they're all taken. So I'm like trying to like Backroom, like, I couldn't, like, there's no liminal. So the best I could get was, without adding like numbers, was Backroom Spectre. So I'm like, all right, I'll make it my Instagram handle on this other account, and this will be like a landing page for only my Dead Mall liminal and quote unquote cinematic type shots, just because I didn't want them to get lost in the shuffle of my main photo. And that's the same with the Sizz account, which is just black and white.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, because you have several accounts. Like, how do you manage them all?
Not very well. So yeah, when I get my Dead Mall stuff, I try to post it as quick as I can to the Backroom account. And so the Sizz account. So Sizz is actually a type of art itself. It's not exclusive to black and white. But I just thought it was a great opportunity to take the username for my black and white account, since most of the artwork in Sizz is black and white. Very few of my photos on my Sizz account would actually qualify as Sizz. It's an easy landing page. It's worked quite well to meet other black and white photographers.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that was actually a thing. That's interesting.
Yeah, you should definitely go on the Reddits, reddit.com/r/Sizz. The moderator on that does a pretty good job at curating and keeping things alive. I recently deleted all of my photos from that subreddit because I got banned for not leaving a comment that was long enough, and it just didn't sit well with me. I'll probably go back to the subreddit though. It irked me. So I was like, no, I've been contributing for like a year and a half. I'm not going to get banned for that.
That seems like a bizarre thing to get banned for, but I do actually like this idea of using Reddit as a source of imagery. Because I think one thing that we forget is that Instagram is not the only way to have your work seen. And actually, I think there are other websites such as like Pinterest and such as Reddit, where your work is actually going to be picked up a lot easier and a lot more than something like Instagram. I think we spend a lot of time on Instagram because it's popular, but it's not actually impactful in the same way as other websites can be. It's something that I was listening to a podcast the other day actually at work about it. It was quite interesting. Something to think about, I think.
I don't like Instagram too much, but at the current moment, it's just, I think Reddit's probably the most useful one, but Reddit can be annoying sometimes because you can be anonymous on Reddit, which of course I'm not because it's my photos, but you get some really, really toxic people on Reddit's. And what they'll do is they'll like brigade you. So like, I don't know how they have the time to do this, but they'll follow you around. Every time you leave a comment, they'll be right there downvoting it. And it's really, really annoying sometimes. So Reddit culture is annoying, but it's good ultimately if you're posting your photos. I would just recommend photographers like don't engage. Ask a technical question. And I'm bad for this. I engage every time someone's on me. Like I engage. I can't help it. But don't engage. Never engage. Just post your photos. Let them be. Don't argue. Be positive. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck in the rabbit hole of having these neckbeards follow you around.
I think it's kind of an interesting consideration because I feel like it's hard to find a balance between posting work and engaging because you want to talk to people about what you're doing. But at the same time, you don't want to spend time talking that you're not actually doing anything. You know, you have to create a balance of actually creating work as well as talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about balance, but you always got to be careful with like anonymous social media because, I mean, it's not so bad now that YouTube doesn't have the downvotes visible, but if YouTube had downvotes visible, the last thing you want is to accidentally say something that might piss off someone who can anonymously go and make your life much more difficult.
Yeah, it comes back to the technology thing of like technology is not all great. There are definitely parts of it that, you know, just aren't particularly helpful, particularly if something like the arts, for instance, where like you've taken time and effort to create something and you're happy with it and, you know, you feel like it's the best thing you've ever created and someone just, you know, comments on it negatively or someone kind of, you know, doesn't like it for some reason, they let you know that it can really ruin your experience of creating. It can really like, you know, and I'm not saying everyone needs to be positive and happy all the time, but, you know, critique can be constructive. It doesn't have to just be negative. And I think sometimes people don't really realize that.
Yeah, I mean, artists should always be open to valid critique. I find sometimes the ego gets in the way where we just don't accept any critique. But with that being said, not all critique is going to be good critique. I mean, I've had people tell me my night photos are underexposed. They're overexposed half the time. Like if you really want to get, I think it's subjective when you're talking about exposure value because it depends what you're going for. But I mean, I think most people would not consider my photos underexposed at night because like they're exposed for so long. But anyways, you'll get weird comments like that, or someone will say, I remember this one. It was just a dumb little shot. It was a blue hour. It was in Shediac, just moonlight over the water. It wasn't like any fancy shot. It was just buried in with a set. And some dude on Reddit was like, I don't think the exposure adds anything to this. And it's like, well, it adds light because if there wasn't exposure, you would not see anything. It might not be a good photo. And I personally think it's a boring photo that I took and posted here, but that's not valid critique. I find you're always going to get that. And you know, the people that get it the worst are women shooting. There's always some dude in the comments trying to say something like, whether it's about framing or horizon lines, and like I'd say 70% of the time it's like just complete nonsense. They're just trying to like, you know, ruffle feathers and, you know, poke.
Yeah, which is unhelpful because I think we need to remember like everybody starts from somewhere. Just because someone takes an image that maybe you wouldn't have taken or maybe you don't particularly like doesn't mean that their experience as an artist is less valid than yours. It doesn't mean that you're any better than them. It just means that they're at a different stage in their artistic journey. That's all it means. You know, I think we need to really respect and appreciate that because there's a point in time at which you yourself would also that person would also have been in that position of being a beginner and only just knowing what they know.
Yeah, you got to be smart with the way you deliver tips and feedback. And I think some people are just unnecessarily aggressive with it in a way that's not helpful. And I think sometimes, you know, people are not the most receptive to feedback. Sometimes I'm not receptive to feedback, but what I'll do is I'll log it and then I'll just think about it for like a week and then I'll finally get it. I'll message the person back saying, you know what, you were right.
It's also funny how it's often the negative comments that stay with you more than the positive ones.
Yeah, 100%.
Like it's
especially with art.
And it's funny how when people say to you, you know, like, oh, your work is amazing, or like, you know, well done, or like, I really value what you do, you're just like, oh yeah, thanks. But if someone says, you know, like, oh, I hate what you do, or they're like, oh, this is not right, it affects you way more deeply than anything nice somebody says to you. It's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, that comment I was talking about, the moon and Shediac, this was like almost 2 years ago. I still remember it. But yeah, it's funny how that stuff works.
So, in terms of your work, do you have any particular routines that help you create your work?
Yeah, my creative process is bad. My systems in life are not good. They're like, I'm working on reworking them
Yeah.
so that it's more fluid. But yeah, my creative process is not good at all. I'm basically just shooting whenever I feel like it, whenever I can, which unfortunately lately has not been often. So I definitely need to, like, work on that. And I don't quite know how, but as I get my life systems in place, I'll hopefully get something in place to do a better creative process. I honestly, I don't even know what other people's creative process is like. I should probably ask
Yeah.
the Instagram, see what people say.
So this is an interesting thing. Like, I feel like that's actually not a bad thing, though. I feel like the fact that you're shooting as and when you can is a good thing because that means you're still making time for it. You know, it might not be because, like, are you really going to set yourself a routine? Like, is that something you're really going to upkeep? Is that something that you can upkeep with your life? You know, I think the idea of being kind of in a routine and being kind of set with like, oh, I go and shoot on Thursdays or whatever. Like that sounds really good on the surface and that sounds like attainable, but is it really attainable when you think about your life? Like you might not be in the mood, you know, particularly. Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
routine is probably not like the best thing for me in that regard, but like a system in place, like a thing I do, like if I'm like, okay, I want to shoot this day, I don't know, maybe it's like a certain hat, or I'll put in my contacts. If I put in my contacts, I'm committed to doing stuff that day
Yeah,
because they're expensive. So
yeah, yeah.
that's probably part of it. Because if I don't put in contacts, I'll be stuck home. Points of friction, actually, there's a book called Atomic Habits that is really good for probably any artist. You got to remove points of friction. If you want to paint more and you spend most of your time in the living room, but your painting setup is in your bedroom, has a huge point of friction. You want to limit that. So, maybe put your painting setup in your living room, for example. Or
Yeah,
if you
that's a
want to
good point.
shoot more, you want to take more photos. And for example, if your camera is in your walk-in closet, maybe put it by your door instead. So you take your camera with you, even if you don't plan to shoot.
See, that's a good point because what I've been doing recently personally is I've been taking my camera with me to work just in case when I walk up to work, I see anything that I want to take pictures of because otherwise I'll see stuff and I want to take a picture of that and then just not do that because I don't have my camera with me. So I agree. I think it's about, you're right. That's a really good point. It's about creating habits and cultivating the right environment in which you can create. That's what it's about because otherwise you won't
Yeah.
create, you know.
And honestly, photographers always should carry one camera with them. Always,
But,
always. Even if you don't take a photo for 3 weeks, keep it with you.
but how often do you shoot work? Or at least like, do you, wait, how can I ask you this question? I guess kind of what I'm asking, like quite curiously actually, is like, at what point do you think you need to stop shooting and actually do something with the work you have? Because I feel like the problem is that you could overshoot.
Yeah, so like with film, maybe not so much because
Yeah.
like I have a backlog right now of stuff. But the thing with film that you get into is you'll get back a bunch of rolls and photos, and you're like, "Fuck, I love all of these." I wasn't supposed to swear on that.
That's fine.
You get your photos back, and you're like, "I like all of these photos," and you want to post them all right away, but it's annoying for everyone if you post like 3 photos a day. It's annoying. Even once per day, you're going to lose like a huge chunk of people. So like once every 2 days is I don't mind when people post once a day. It's not annoying. It's just Instagram will push you out of the algorithm. But that extra day of separation every second day is perfect. But you can only post 10 photos, and what if you like 3 photos as a standalone photo? So you'll sit on a backlog for months, and then you'll be waiting. Like me, for example, I haven't posted much lately. I sent off 8 rolls of film, and there are like 3 photos I like. And my current film in my fridge, I have one exposed roll that is not going to be developed probably before the end of the year.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, all right, well, I don't want to get in the business of forcing myself to go out and shoot to try and compensate for my lack of photos to post right now. I have winter photos. I keep my winter photos backlogged. I like to post seasonally now. I've not been diagnosed with OCD, but it's very. If you look at my grid, everything is like, I don't want to say perfect, but like I spend a lot of time planning how I post things for my grid because I think the way people present their photos is often overlooked, and I think it's nice. I like that the vertical photos in between because it gives more separation. The reason I use that I use an app called InstaSize, the borders. I don't add much of a border. I just add enough of a border where it doesn't connect to the photo on top or beside it. So yeah, it's all about like the presentation of the photo. And yeah, I don't like to post winter photos in the middle of summer.
It makes me wonder like what you'd be like if you had your work exhibited. Because I imagine like the way you'd set your work up would be very, very interesting. Because it wouldn't necessarily be just images on a white wall. It could be like something very different or be something very methodical.
I'd probably go minimalist. I'd probably go for like a one color wall if I had the option, but there would be, there'd be rulers involved. There would be tape measuring involved, lasers. Everything would have to be perfectly symmetrical, perfectly leveled. Every frame would have to be a frame that was like would go well with the other frame. I remember one time I sold a dude a print. Two of them had white borders, one of them didn't. Or no, two had no borders, one had a white border. And he was like, oh, this is fine. I'm like, just in case I printed off another one, I'll let you know when it's in. Like a week later, he's like, yeah, you're right. Like, let's swap these out. Because I don't know, like
it's your representation, it's the representation of your work. You want it to be just as perfect as the way you'd present it yourself, or the way you'd hang it yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes a lot of sense. Like it's as I said, like it's your life, it's your time, it's the effort you've gone to create the work. So it makes sense to me. But I also think like I guess I have to ask you, like, is showing your work in a gallery, for instance, something you'd be interested in doing?
Yeah, I mean, there's some local galleries here. If they ever were interested in having any of my photos in them, that'd be cool. Even like auctions at like cafes where they give the money to charity, totally into that. I've messaged a few of them. Usually I don't get answers back. Sometimes I don't even open the message. But art can sometimes be a very cliquey community, and if you don't know the right people, you don't usually get into them.
Have you gone into these places directly?
Oh yeah.
And spoke to them about it? Okay.
They're not super interested in what I have, but that's fine. I mean, they have some really good stuff in there. It's not, I shouldn't say that. It's not that they're not interested. It's that they have a lot of stuff in there. Yeah. I don't want to make it sound like they're like dismissive. It's not that. There are a lot of really talented artists where I live. Like world-class type artists that I don't understand how they live here. Yeah, if you walked into the galleries in Moncton, New Brunswick, you'd be very, very surprised at the level of quality and detail that we have, despite being such a tiny little place in the world.
I think we always forget that everywhere actually has its place to be shown. It just may not be the place for your work. There will be somewhere else that will be suitable for your work. I think that's the thing we forget. And it's very easy to be like, oh, just because you don't live in, say, London, or you don't live in New York, or you don't live somewhere that is like, a quote unquote arts city. Like that doesn't mean that places you're going to exhibit your work are going to be any less kind of meaningful. I don't know. It's a funny thing. If you don't live like in a quote unquote art city, like that doesn't mean that your work is not valid,
Yeah, I agree with you fully. One day we'll get there.
Absolutely. I don't know. I think there's a lot of changes. I think not just as a photographer need to make, but I think society needs to make in terms of photography as art. Because I still think so many people just don't really see the value in photography as art. And it frustrates me personally for a lot of different reasons. But I also kind of feel like it's just, like, where are the galleries that you can submit your work to? Where are the people giving photographers grants? Where are the spaces in which you can talk about your work? Where are the places that are hosting photography workshops? Where are the places that are hosting panel discussions? Like, where are these places? Because they don't seem to, at least for me at least, I don't really see them. So, that's
Yeah, they're very rare. So I think you make a good point that there's perhaps not a large enough space carved out in the art sphere for photography. Um, and if there is, it's usually for like select photographers that
Absolutely.
probably don't really need it.
Absolutely. But then the good thing about that is there's always a niche there to be filled. So that's always interesting. So
Yeah,
thinking about the
absolutely.
future, like that could be very interesting.
I've actually been so when I do fix up my house, one thing I plan to do is I plan to find some of the local artists and photographers. I want to put together a bunch of their prints and stuff that they want to sell. I want to hang it up throughout my house, invite some of them over, but I happen to know some people who are successful in life who would be able to buy things like this and would probably go. So I do kind of want to turn my house into a little bit of a part-time art exhibition, if you will.
See, that is amazing. And I actually know two artists who have done that. If you want me to, I'll send you their link. So if you want
Yeah,
to discuss that, I can do.
that'd be cool.
Let me write their names here because I know
It's a
people
very
who do that.
it's a very good community locally for the art scene. Like there's probably a good bit of people that would show up, and there's a lot of like underground art shows, if you will, that I find pretty interesting. Artists that might not always get the exposure in the big galleries that are able to get a little bit of a foothold. Now, obviously, these people don't always have the money for those sort of things, but you'd be surprised what sort of cool people. Like I think sometimes we dismiss wealthy people, but sometimes there's some really really cool wealthy people out there that will absolutely like support certain artists and help them out a ton. Um,
I think the actual problem is that there's just too much good art. I think that's really the problem. Is that
yeah,
like for me personally, like you can probably imagine, like every single time I open up Instagram, I find like 10 artists I want to speak to, and it's just like there is just honestly just so much good art, and everything is so valid, and everything has its own kind of purpose, and the kind of conversations you can have around that piece of work. So it's kind of, I don't know. I think it's hard to sometimes actually kind of distinguish like what makes somebody worth investing in, because it's just like everything is done. Everything has been done before. Nothing's really original. But like, why is it that certain people get pushed to the top and other people don't? What is it about? Say somebody like Todd Hyder, for instance. Like, I like his work a lot. He's a cool photographer. But like, what makes his work so special? Like, what about everybody else that creates similar imagery? You know?
I have a take on that actually, and perhaps and this comes from like what I do for business. I won't get into my business
Yeah,
and
that's
like
fine.
how I built it, but like I didn't really have a ton of opportunities getting into it, and I think a lot of artists can probably empathize with that. Getting I think known and like accepted as that artist that gets successful. It's not always a skill thing. Sometimes it's a skill thing and a personality thing, and a good strategy I think some artists should employ if they wish. Make sure they bring the thing with them. So if you're a photographer, always keep that thing on you all the time. It's not just about the photos you take in this case. It's about the people you might meet that might say, hey, what's this? And they'll follow you on Instagram, maybe they buy a print with art, painting types of things. Keep like an iPad on you. Even if you are not particularly good at drawing on an iPad, bring it with you and draw something on it. Like it doesn't matter what you're drawing. The whole goal is to get a conversation going with someone that, I mean, these are cool people too. It's not just about them buying your art. It's about, meeting other cool people, and these people happen to be able to connect you to other people that may buy your art or.
So that's a very good piece of advice. And that's actually really, really funny because before we recorded, I was sending a very long rambling voice message to a really cool photographer called Rick, who I have not messaged back for a long time. And in it, he was talking about wanting to do street photography, and he wanted to approach people and shoot their image. And I said to him, like, one piece of advice I'd have for him is have business cards so that if you are meeting people, you can give them something, because I think that way they'll remember the experience and they'll remember who you are because they have something to hold in their hand. If you just show them your work on Instagram, they'll forget you instantly. If they follow you, you'll get lost in their followers. If you give them a business card, they may not keep it, but when they have it in their hand, they'll remember you in the interaction. And it's about being memorable, not just about showing somebody how good you are, because then they're like, everybody's good, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Another thing too on the business cards, I would urge people to get a plastic business card, built like a credit card. They cost $2 per, but they're better for the environment because we won't
Yeah.
use as many, and the people will hang on to them and they will survive the washing machine.
Yes. Absolutely. So kind of continuing on with the idea of the creative process, like how often do you show the before and after of your work?
Uh, so I only did that a few times, where like I'll record a video on my phone and then shoot the scene. Like it took so much effort to like remember because the delay in the film. Like I record on my phone, but I also store like photos and like memes on my phone. So
Of course.
to to put the folder together of the videos, uh, uh, of the shots, and then wait for the shots to come in, and then do like the reels or the TikToks where I show the video then the shot. It took a lot of time, and I barely got any views out of it. So I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to do this again for this platform. I might do it for my YouTube in the future. I'll get like a proper GoPro with like the harness, so I don't have to constantly pull my phone up. I'd rather just record the whole thing and then clip it after. But yeah, I basically never do that.
Yeah, 'cause I'm kind of like curious just to know, like, do you think that showing the process of your work, particularly like before and afters, for instance, like the editing, like, do you think that takes away from the image, or do you think that adds to the image?
I think it adds to the image. So I don't really edit anything on my ends. Like the scans are technically edited because they're negatives, but I don't edit anything on my end past that. The most I'll ever do sometimes with the black and white, if I find the scan too flat, I'll like slightly drop the blacks or the contrast. I'll increase, which I could do in a dark room with a print with burning. So it's, but like with color film, like I'll rarely. I try to use filters when I can, like on
Yeah,
lens, because the whole idea I use film is to make it like obviously because I have to, but like it makes it more difficult for me as well. Even if I had a digital camera, I would still use some film. Um, but yeah, the only real editing I ever did, uh, I posted a photo recently. I don't know if it was able to unarchive, but it was just a photo of a front of a house, and I just ever so slightly put a little bit of warmth in that photo. And I have no problem, by the way, when other people do that sort of thing with their photos. Like I'm not one of those like purists that you have to post it. I only take an issue when people edit something so far beyond the film's characteristic that it's like very clearly like edited all to hell. But yeah, like personally, I don't. And I'm ordering an orange filter. Like I think it's an 085, which just slightly warms a photo.
yeah, because I'm actually very interested, particularly when it comes to film photography. Because I don't know, because obviously what you can do is obviously you scan the negative and then you can put that into say Lightroom or Photoshop and edit that. Like, and I'm kind of it's kind of curious for me because I feel like if you're shooting on film, isn't the whole point that you want the colors that the film is going to give you? Isn't that like the whole point of shooting on film, like in terms of the stock and the colors? So it's kind of it seems I guess it seems odd to me that people would take an image in film and then edit that. But I'm also kind of curious, like, what is your opinion on people who shoot digitally and edit that to make it look like film?
Yeah, I mean it's the trends. I would much rather see that than see someone use those. If I told you what a dirty boots filter was, would you know what I mean?
No.
So it's you ever see like a wedding photographer and everything they post is just like aggressively desaturated, like brown, white, and it's they all look the same. All their wedding photos look identical. I'm not a fan of that. Like sometimes they're really good photographers that do it, but a lot of times it's just people that buy a nice camera, learn nothing about photography, and then just apply that preset to everything they shoot, and they do fine. But without going off in a tangent, I have no problem with people that do that. The only time it irks me is if they do it and then they use like film hashtags or they try to like
Yeah.
do that. Like I'm not like I do like little digital quote unquote art on my iPad. I'm kind of loosely trying to eventually become a tattoo artist one day, but
That's cool.
um, yeah, I'd love to do that. Want to do it forever, but yeah, like I wouldn't call it an oil painting, no matter how much I could make it look like an oil painting. So when I see someone digital editing, you can make it look identical like film if you want. I mean, within reason. I think there's a reason why Hollywood still uses Vision 3 film in a lot of motion pictures. It's because you can come close, but you can't really recreate it to a T. Yeah, and sometimes they just add grain and they think that's it.
I mean, because a while back there was a YouTube video by Mango Street called, I think it was something like 5 ways to edit your digital images to look like film, and it actually caused quite an uproar with
I
photographers.
saw it.
Because a lot of photographers were like, this is not unacceptable, but they were like, this is kind of cheating. This is kind of devaluing film. This is making things seem like what they're not. But then I kind of, I'm kind of very on the fence. On one hand, I understand, like, if you're spending the money and the time and the effort to actually shoot film and actually go through that whole creative process to make it look imperfect, because that's how it is. Like, it can be very annoying if people are coming along with digital images that maybe didn't require the same amount of care and consideration and editing the images to look like what you would be shooting. But at the same time, I also feel like, well, that is the kind of, I guess, like the joy and also just kind of like the things you can do with digital as well. Like, and actually, I guess I kind of like, what is your opinion on the whole film photography versus digital photography debate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm never a fan of infighting within any community. Uh, I think there's just so much nuance to that debate and who's debating it and what they're debating. Ultimately, just do what you want to do with your photos. If you want to, I mean, part of the reason portrait is so popular is because of how well it lends itself to editing within Lightroom. So I mean, like whatever your goals are and whatever's attainable for it, just do that and try to ignore the gatekeeping and the infighting within the community. Half the time, these critics are going to criticize you anonymously, and if you go to their profile, they don't post anything. So it's a lot of noise.
That's very true. And I think it's also just important to remember, like, you need to find your own kind of style and your own niche, or at least your own kind of artistic voice. And actually, like, do you think it's important for an artist to have their own unique style or voice?
I'd say yes, but at the same time, they shouldn't rush it. They should really like the style and the voice will come over time. And I think anyone that's like doing art will like I mean doing anything in life, you will eventually change and adapt your practices. It's not really until like a few years of doing something consistently that you'll begin to have things that you do a certain way. Like my job, I've been doing it almost 8 years, and I do so many things differently than I would even do a year ago.
Yeah.
So it's always important to be open to things and adapt and just go with the flow.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. And you're right. Like, you have to remember, like, the routines you'll get into are things that work for you, not for everybody. Because I think it's very easy at the start of any kind of career, whether it's photography or not, like, to kind of follow what is quote unquote the rules or follow what other people tell you to do. And it's like, well, eventually you'll develop your own routines. Eventually you'll get to a point where you understand yourself and your role within the certain role you're doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
And not to kind of, I think also the biggest problem, I think, particularly with photography and art, is that, like, you don't want to copy somebody else in terms of, like, what works for that person works for them. Like, they've established those routines because they're at a certain place in their life. But you can't just say, if someone's shooting a lot of petrol stations at night, you can't just shoot petrol stations at night and expect the same kind of accolades or the same kind of conversation or the same kind of popularity. I think you have to also bring something unique and something different. That is your view of the world.
Yeah, and I also don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, especially if you're starting out I don't like using the word copy necessarily
Yeah.
because, like it sometimes has a bad connotation to it. That's even the right way to use that word.
Yeah.
Because if I see someone like copying, like quote unquote, an exact shot I did using the exact film, I'm not going to be upset about it, even if they saw my film. If they didn't see the photo I took, it's like, cool, you saw the same thing I saw and you took it the same way. Like, like you got good taste, kind of jokingly.
Absolutely.
Like,
Absolutely.
I'm going to take it negatively. And if they did see the stuff I saw and they try to emulate that, that'd be really flattering. I mean, you like the photo I did so much that you went and, went and did the same photo. And that's totally cool. And I live in a place where there's not a lot of photogenic stuff. And I mean, I think photographers here, like, we kind of have this mutual understanding. Like, we live in Moncton. There is not a ton of stuff to shoot here. So, like, if you see a scene that's cool, you shoot it. Like, it's cool if everyone else shoots it. We don't care. Like, that's the thing with photography. 10 people can shoot the same scene. and
Mm.
the odds of any of those photos looking similar is going to be quite slim.
You know, that would be a really good thing to do. Like if you actually got, say, actually, that'd be a really interesting idea. Um, like say if you had five photographers and you had like say an abandoned building or you had like a certain location and you set them a challenge to all take like 10 images in this location. And then at the end you kind of compare and contrast and see what they came up with. Something like that would be really cool. Like that'd be I think that'd make a really cool YouTube video or something like that personally.
So would I'll probably do that. Organize a photo walk with like, submit one photo for each location. That's a really good
Do it.
idea.
Like
Yeah.
absolutely do it. Like these are the kind of things I would love to do if I had, because it's funny because where I live, there's probably a photography community where I live. If there is, I don't know anybody who does photography necessarily around by me. And it's crazy to me that, say you, for instance, or people like in Oregon, as I mentioned earlier, like they have access to a community, they have access to other photographers that they can literally go meet up with. Like that's crazy to me that you wouldn't do that and that you wouldn't create. I don't know, I don't want to use the word content like that loosely, but you wouldn't create content or you wouldn't kind of generate just kind of more community, like actual in-person community. Because I think that's super important. I think, starting like a book club would be great for photographers. I think that would be awesome because how many of us look at photo books anymore? Stuff like that
Yeah.
would be great.
God, I agree. Agree.
Like, stuff like that would be great. Or like, there's just so much you can do if you have access to other photographers. Like, one thing I really want to do next year is on my list of things to do is to meet artists in person. To actually go down to say London, to go to people's studios, record artist promos because like that'd be awesome. See their studio spaces, document their work. That kind of thing. That's my plan for next year. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but it's something that I would love to do. So I think it's super important. Like I would love to find a really cool photographer and follow them around for like without sounding creepy, like follow them around for like 2 or 3 hours and document their whole creative process from the start of them wanting to go out and shoot an image to them actually going out shooting an image. And I actually watched a while ago, I think it's still on YouTube, but I watched a video of William Eggleston, and it was literally like this hour-long YouTube video, and it's literally him just walking around with the camera. Somebody just recorded him walking around with the camera taking pictures, and I thought like that was like so fascinating. Like I love
Oh,
that.
for sure.
I love that kind of content because it's all about how people see. We all live in similar areas, or we all live in different places, but we all see things very differently. And I think there's something really nice about that. Like I watched a YouTube video last night actually, because what I'm trying to do nowadays is that like if I'm sitting down to eat and I'm going to watch YouTube or something, I want to put on something that's going to inspire me rather than something that's mindless because it's going to make more sense. So I was watching a really great video about somebody shooting LA at night and then walking around with a camera at night, and they didn't have a tripod, which I was fascinated by. Um, and it was fascinating, and it really inspired me to go out and shoot stuff, which is cool. So I don't know. I think it kind of goes back to earlier what we were saying in terms of like be conscious of what you're consuming. Because at the end of the day, if you're consuming stuff that's going to inspire you, you're going to be inspired. If you're consuming stuff that isn't going to help you and makes you feel negative about your life, you're not going to want to do anything. So it's kind of important.
Exactly. I agree.
Oh, and also, you said that you want to like do because you have a YouTube channel, but like, is that something
Mhm.
you want to grow at some point? I'm assuming.
Absolutely. So, Willem Verbeek started his channel with some Super 8 videos. I didn't realize this until
That's
I
cool.
went back and kind of studied. I knew he had done the Super 8 videos and I knew they were older, but I wanted to go back to look at how he had started his channel and Super 8s. And then all of a sudden it was like a photo walking type video, the standard YouTube one, the camera on the body, film the scenes, shoot the scenes. Um, so yeah, I'm probably eventually going to do stuff like that and eventually, really get into it. But trying to do it like a cautious way. Like I don't want to just be one of those, copy and paste YouTube film photographer type people. I also don't want to ever come across as like copycat. I want to make it unique. You ever see Grainy Days? Yeah. So I don't want to be like him because I love how unique it is. Like I like his sense of humor. It's funny, but I want it to also like just be unique in its own way.
So, what do you think would make your videos unique? Because I think personally, I know just asked you a question and I just spoke, I do apologize. But my opinion is I think stuff like having a camera strapped to the body, walking around taking pictures, and doing stuff that is quote unquote the standard YouTube photographer videos. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that's perfect. You should totally do that. But I think the way in which you edit that, and the way in which you do the voiceover for that, and the music you add to that is what's going to make it unique.
Exactly. I agree fully with that. That's the goal.
And actually, there is a video I watched the other day, and it was I should really know these people's names, but I don't really. It sounds weird, but I don't really pay attention to who I'm watching on YouTube. If that makes weird sense, I'm more interested in the actual content I'm consuming, which probably sounds terrible. But there's a photographer who created a video the day that I watched was like how I create YouTube videos. So I'll send that to you if you want. I'll send you some suggestions if you like. So I've got quite a few suggestions.
Yeah,
Um,
anything you want to send like that, please do.
and
I
also,
keep it
if
in my notes.
and also if you want any actual suggestions for YouTube videos of what I think would be kind of cool, I'd happily send you those if you're interested. Or if you want to discuss it with me at some other point, just please do message me. I'd love to talk about it. I'm really invested in other people's careers as well. Like this is the thing. Like I would love to sit down and talk to people about YouTube and give my input if people want it. Or, kind of if you want to bandy an idea around and be like, oh, what do you think of this? I would love to do that. I think it's important to get different feedback and to kind of have somebody who I think is actually wants you to succeed, because it's very easy to just say, yeah, that's a great idea. But sometimes you have to be realistic about what you can and what you can't do. If you were like, oh, Aaron, I want to go to jump on a plane to Europe and just shoot around Europe all day, like that'd be great. But if you can't afford it, you have to think, you're gonna have to be like, you can't do it. So if you have any ideas and stuff you want to throw around, give me a shout and I'll always happily discuss it with you.
Yeah, yeah. I like that you're a cool combination. So you're vocal. You do your own photography, you're doing your own thing, but you also give really good thoughts and
Yeah.
opinions about those sort of things that are really important because that's what the viewers are, the people that would be interested in my channel would want. But I don't know what, because they're not as vocal.
Yeah.
I don't know what they would like and dislike. All I ever see is the like button and a dislike button. So
Yeah.
it's good to have an elaboration on what would and wouldn't work.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, the thing is, like, I'm very lucky that I have some kind of insight into kind of how artists operate or kind of the things that people like to do or things that work. And not just that, like I kind of look at like what do I like to consume? What am I interested in? I always think about that with my own work in terms of like same with the like with interview notes. I always ask questions that I want to be asked. That's how I create questions. That's really what my interview notes are very selfish. They're just things I want to know because these are the questions that I would want to be asked. It's kind of
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like sometimes it seems like I know more. I think sometimes, yeah, I think sometimes it seems to other people that I know more about what I'm doing than I do. Because I think I can't really reiterate enough that I literally just talk to people. That's all I do. I don't do anything else beyond that. But it helps, so it's cool.
Yeah, well, you do well. Like, I mean, I listen to the podcast. Like, you ask good questions. You ask the questions I would want to know
I
about
appreciate that.
the different people, and I would rarely actually think of these questions, but you ask them like, oh, that's a good question. Doing the sort of thing that you're doing, like it's not easy. You're doing it consistently, but you're also getting creative with the questions, which in
Yeah.
itself is like conversations, interviews. That's an art form. It's it all kind of goes into the same thing. I think it's all type of art.
I think it's because at the end of the day, I feel like art is so elusive. I think the problem with art is that it's not readily accessible to everybody. And sometimes the artists themselves don't really know why they're creating it. So I just want to create a space, as I've already said, like where artists can just talk about their work, where you have the option to kind of just actually just think about what it is that you're actually doing. And, hopefully, this conversation makes you think about other things and makes you kind of re-question, what you're doing. Or I don't know, I just want it to be some kind of weird, like therapeutic, uh, I don't know, some kind of like therapeutic conversation where you just think about what you do. Because I think we don't often get the chance to really sit down and talk about what we do, you know, especially artists
Hmm.
in galleries. Like gallery shows are great, but you're having the same conversation with like 50 people. You don't sit down with one person and actually really kind of get to the actual root of what you do, you know. At
Yeah,
least
I
at
agree.
least in my
I
opinion.
like that. I like that. There's definitely a lot of people. One of them actually was on your Instagram story. Like a lot of people, expired Brent. I love the work that he posts.
Yes.
Um, so it's cool to see that sort of stuff. It gives me a chance to kind of like know what their process is like.
Yeah, he's definitely on the list to interview. I've got, as you probably saw that post, I've got a lot of people to interview at some point. I don't know, like part of me just wants to quit my job and just do this full time, but I don't make the money to do that. Like that's the thing.
Well,
Like realistically, I would love the time to do it full time because it takes a lot of time, as you can imagine. Um, but yeah, I'm not going to do that because having money, paying most of my rent is also quite nice as well.
I'll add a couple of pieces of advice I learned from my
Yeah.
business. It's commission only. So usually when people start in my business, they start from another job. And what we usually tell people is it takes 2 years to get started. So don't jump into anything full time within 2 years. Like if you're doing what you're doing, for example, you'll know like in 2 years. You'll have all the episodes. You'll feel that momentum coming, and the finances will make sense. We also say make sure you have 3 months of life expenses saved up
Okay.
entirely before even considering it, but ideally 6. And yeah, like don't rush it, and keep being consistent too. That's going to be huge. I think you're going to take off probably before you hit that 100 video mark. But yeah, play it by ear.
Well, I appreciate that a lot. I actually really do appreciate that advice. And I'm kind of very like ambivalent about doing this full time because I have a really cool artist friend that I haven't met that long ago, but he's really awesome. And he said to me, I really hope you do this full time. And he's very much like a champion of me doing it full time. I mean, he says to me very often, actually, I should do it full time. And I'm like, I would love to, but I'm going to be realistic. Like, just because I could do this full time doesn't mean that I will do this full time. And even if I was in a
Mhm.
position where I was making a secondary income from it, I don't know if I'd still do it full time because sometimes having that distraction away from doing this is helpful. Like me being at work gives me the space to think about this as opposed to having to be always doing it. I don't know. It's something that I'm just thinking about in terms of like, it could be a cool idea, it could not be a cool idea. But anyway, this is not about me. Let's talk about you.
Yeah, good thoughts to have though.
I don't know. It's one of them. It's thoughts, I guess. What can I say? But I appreciate your advice very much, and I think it's realistic. So I do appreciate that.
It's important for photographers to tune into this sort of thing too, because it really helps the community.
Yeah, 100%. Like I actually often joke that I should just have just created a photography podcast on the side because the amount of photographers I talk to is honestly insane, and the amount of people I really want to just speak to, like on a one-to-one level, is a lot. And I feel bad sometimes because I feel like I'm just having the same conversation. But at the same time, I'm also like, well, everyone has something different to say. Even if their work is the same, everyone has something different to say. Like it's funny, like everybody's work might be similar, but it's never the same. And also you don't know who you're going to meet from other people. Like I interviewed, I'm assuming you know his work, but JT Fox.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
think
it's
he's
like
in Canada.
no, he's from America. I don't know which part of
Jeremy, right?
America.
Jeremy
No,
Fox. I
no,
think.
not Jeremy Fox. JT Fox. Jake Fox.
Oh, I
Yeah.
think a different guy then. I think it's someone
Yes.
else.
Yeah, so you're thinking of Jeremy Fox, who actually runs what's the magazine? Extraordinary magazine.
Oh, that's
That's
him.
his.
Okay.
That's his.
I don't know why.
But so the thing about him actually, he's a lovely guy and he's somebody else I want to interview. But he actually, when I posted this feature, he actually didn't want me to tag the magazine because he didn't want to be associated with it. And I was a bit like,
Oh, that explains it.
I was a bit
That
like,
explains why I don't know.
I was a bit like, but why though? Because what you're doing is incredible.
I know why. Well, I think I know why.
Oh,
He probably doesn't want people to think that he's doing it to boost his own photography, because there are some people that do that
hmm.
where they'll like curate and they'll very curated by this page run by, like they very clearly are doing it to
Of
benefit, which is
course,
fine.
of course. But I also think you deserve to be praised for the hard work you're putting into something.
Oh,
Like
agreed.
that's the thing. Like and running even like an Instagram page, it takes a lot of work. Like I'm friends with Jesse Tate. I don't know if you know Jesse Tate, who runs Just Feel. Like I'm friends with him. And like I know how hard it is to run. Well, I already know anyway because I've run one, but an Instagram page, and keeping it active and being constantly consistent and actually responding to people. And it's like for someone like Jeremy, like I kind of wish that he got praised more for the hard work he puts into it because his curation is really, really great. His creation is so good. I'd actually love for him to create stuff for the Fine Fruit Bowl. At some point in the future, I'd love to have like a team. Like that'd be the ideal dream. But right now, but then again, I like control, so I don't know about that. We'll see. Anyways,
Yeah.
moving very swiftly on from me talking about myself all the time. So, Super 8 films, we touched on it earlier, but I'm kind of curious, like the idea of nostalgia, I feel like that's such a common thread in not just your work, but obviously a lot of photographers. Do you think that that is a cliche, or is that something you choose to deliberately tap into?
Uh, it wasn't intentional at first. And honestly, even when I took that Larry Electric photo, my only thought was this will look cool in 20 years. But after that photo, I really got into Greg Girard's photography. He's a photographer out of Canada, started in the 70s in Vancouver, and then shot a bunch of stuff out east, like Japan, all throughout Asia. Really, really cool body of work, all done on slide film, mostly done on slide film. And where was I going with that? What was the question?
Not nostalgia.
Yeah, yeah. So he had a quote in one of his photo books. I don't remember which photo book. I think it was Under Vancouver. I have a copy of it, and the quote in there says it's not his quote. He's quoting someone else in an interview at the end or at the beginning, and it's every photo becomes interesting after 20 years. And that quote just sticks with me every time I shoot anything now.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it because I don't know. I just feel like your work, particularly like the Dead Mall series, where people are going to relate to the universal kind of concept of, you know, the fact that space is becoming scarce and space is becoming commodified. People are going to relate to that.
Yeah,
Mm.
I really love the reception I get on that. Not just like the likes or whatever, but the comments. Every time I post it on Reddit, uh, I'll get people that like grew up in the 70s, some grew up in the 80s, 90s, people even grew up in the early 2000s, and they all comment with their stories about the mall. And it's so cool how like a place just sort of transcended so many different generations is now just at a complete standstill. And every time I talk to like CBC Arts was pretty cool about this. And every time I talk to like a news person about it or most people, they just hyper focus on like, oh yeah, malls are dead, online shopping, this, that. And it's like, yeah, that's part of it, the changing landscape. But for me, it's a combination of the fact that this was an intergenerational hangout place that just kept alive through all these generations. And also, it's a time capsule of certain design trends that were so tiny
Yeah.
and niche that I mean, people overlook it. But like for me, when I go in these dead malls, I'm looking at like the tile patterns, the colors on the wall, the stylings. We don't have neon signs here, but I love them. Um, I look at all those things. So for me, it's design and community, not so much marketplace.
So two things from that. Firstly, it's fascinating for me because here in the UK, we don't really have things like that here. Like, and also not just that, like if somewhere's abandoned, it's actually very hard to get access to it. Like just a shopping center we have here, also we call them centers, not malls, which is funny. So shopping centers we have here, like the shopping center in my city, for instance, like if I wanted to go and shoot that at night, which actually would be awesome, there's no way I'd be able to do that because I just wouldn't have permission to do that. They just wouldn't let you do that. But also, like, have you ever thought about creating a photo book where you have your images on one page and other people's stories on the next?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one thing I love the format in the photo book that Greg Girard has is on the very back there'll be a reference saying which film he used on these different things. I love that for a technical
Yeah.
perspective, so I know like what it was. But I would definitely do that with a little snippet of detail in the photos, like the type it up afterwards. I would do that. It would just take me a long time to do it.
I just think that I think you could really create a really interesting photo book with this series of work because I think it could be, I don't know, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to bring people's stories that you see on Reddit and make them into a physical book and actually have, obviously with permission, and actually have that as like a physical object. I think there could be a lot of opportunity there because I think the idea of dead malls, the idea of liminal space, I think that is very popular. And it's not about capitalizing on popular trends, but it's very universal. I think there's a big difference between things being popular and things being universal. I don't know. I think that could be like a really interesting
That's a great idea. I'm
idea for
definitely
you.
going to employ that. Definitely going to employ that. Even if I have to interview a few different people to get like their stories of that
Yeah.
specific mall, 100% will do that.
It just seems like to me, like into my mind, because you just said like people's different stories. Like to me, that makes the most sense. Like, how would I immortalize this other than being on a webpage? No, I don't know. It's just like the idea of because like you're like as you just said, like these people have got these amazing stories on Reddit, and it's like how cool would that be to share that with the world? Because once if you're not on Reddit, but you still want to contribute, like I don't know, like maybe we just need to have a way to figure out how we can get like even like the general public involved in more photo projects. You know, that could be really interesting. And I think honestly, that's something you could probably crowdfund.
Yeah, adding their stories to it. It's a really, really good idea, and I'm 100% going to implement that into my Dead Mall photo book because it adds the character and the life into it, and the contrast between the stories and the stark photos and emptiness. I think could be very cool.
Or if you ever want to handle that, or if you ever need money to invest into it, give me a shout. Because one thing I really want to do, and I know I've said it before, like I really want to invest in photographers. I really want to invest in projects. One thing I really want to do in the future, obviously, my own finances considering, I want to give people grants, or just stuff like that would be awesome. Like if I could pay somebody's rent for a year, so they can just create work, like that'd be insane. Which is why I want to make money with the Flying Fruit Bowl, not because I care about giving myself a wage, which would be great, but I want to really give it back to other people. Like that'd be like the best thing ever. I don't know. There's
Hmm.
just so much I would love to do for other people because I think it's important. And spending money on other people is way more fun than spending money on yourself, I think.
I agree. And for the crowdfunding on this, what I'll do is I'll probably like get people to like put a deposit in to like hold a
Yeah.
copy, and I'll number and limit the copies. So like there'll be a first edition, a second edition. The first editions will all be like numbered and signed, whatever, just so they're at least unique. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'm like fortunate. I won't need any like backing, just because finally getting into a good position here with
Yeah.
my house. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of artists I know that could use that.
Yeah, but I also think just because you may not need like just because you may necessarily have the money to fund it doesn't mean that crowdfunding it wouldn't be a bad idea. Because I feel like it's also about the hype and it's also about giving back to other people in the community. Like I feel like sometimes crowdfunding can be seen as like a cash grab when actually someone like Noah Diary, for instance. Like I told the guy who runs Noah Diary, I said, why don't you create a Patreon? Because I think at the end of the day, if you make money from what you do, it's not a bad thing because you're giving back to the community. Like it's only going to
Hmm.
help. I think the problem is that we look at money and the idea of making money for what you do is a bad thing when actually if you're going to give back to the community, why is that a bad thing? If you're creating a photo book, where people are going to contribute their work, why is that a bad thing to crowdfund that? I think, if people can crowdfund randomly stupid projects that nobody ever needs, why can you not crowdfund something that's actually going to make a difference to somebody's life?
Yeah, it's a really good point. Really good point. I agree. I agree.
Right. Okay. That's just a random advice that nobody ever asked for, which is perfect, which is exactly what I do every day. Um,
That's good advice.
so actually, so still talking about so going back to your Super 8s for a second, like you want to create more of those, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. I've got two cartridges I just filled out. I'm currently trying to finish up my. I don't know. I'm calling it seasons because it's easy. But yeah, I started filming last summer towards the end of the year, and then I continued to film. And then I did a film through the winter and the spring, and the ones I've just done were spring through summer. So it's a
Oh,
combination of uh, Triax, actually a black and white reversal film.
oh
And
wow.
then it's a Vision 3 500T, which is going to be a little bit scattered because there are some winter shots in there and there are some summer shots in there. And I don't know how much spring is in there. And then Vision 3 200T is what I'm currently loaded up in. And that is probably just going to be exclusively fall and late summer.
That's so interesting. So, like, how does the small little short films you make differ from the photography you take?
Uh, it is, oh, it's so difficult. You can barely see anything through that little Super 8 dial. Like, it's so hard to, any of those shots I have where like I'm focused on something in the foreground and the background's blurry, those are so hard. Those are so hard to do because I can't entirely see what I'm focusing on. And whenever I do the shots where I'm panning, because there's a little knob on the side, and then there's the twisting. The twisting is the focusing, and a little knob on the side right by the twisting is my zoom and focal length rule. The focal length and aperture is super important. The wider your focal length, the more is in focus at a wider aperture. So it's a 7.5 millimeter to I think 60 millimeter lens, which is a lot more zoomed in on a Super 8 than a full frame or medium format, and thus uh, the more zoomed in you are, the tighter the aperture you're at, the better. But I mean, some of my early stuff, it's like painful looking at because I was zoomed in and it's like 60 millimeters on a Super 8 at 1.4. And, if you're not zoomed to infinity, nothing is in focus.
That's really interesting though, because I think filmmaking and moving image is so different to photography, yet it aligns so well. And I'm kind of curious, like, if you had a digital camera that can capture video, would you get into more filmmaking?
Yeah, I've even bought a gimbal actually to prepare for
Oh,
it. I will use my M100 if I have to. Um, but yeah, I definitely want to do some more digital filmmaking just to kind of bridge the gap. But I want it to be the same sort of thing, just environmental type stuff.
I don't know. I'm always curious about filmmaking because I'm interested in it myself. It's not something I've ever really delved into. It's something I really would love to delve into. But it's like, why is it so much harder to actually do than it actually seems?
You're looking for stuff for movement, so it's almost like inverse of photography. If
Yeah,
something's moving too much in photography, sometimes that's not great. But if nothing's moving in photography, it's usually good.
yeah,
But if nothing is moving in filmmaking, it's going to be a pretty boring scene. So you
yeah.
got to find movements, which can be tricky. So like sometimes you'll get down low and look for a set of reeds. I like to look for things like waves, birds. Love, love, love to shoot birds. They're perfect. They make a boring scene full of life. But other than that, like it's tricky. It's a totally different thing. You're still doing the framing almost all the time. Yeah. So the horizon lines are the other thing I find difficult, at least with Super 8, because you can't. It's so hard to see out of that thing, especially at night. That it's like keeping the
Yeah, of
thing
course.
straight is so difficult.
That's insane. That's so fascinating, though, 'cause it makes me feel like everyone should try that because it's like the idea of chance could be very interesting in your work because you can't quite see what you're doing. Sometimes things can be too perfect.
I somewhat see what I'm doing. That's one thing I wish uh, my photos generally I'm happy with how well they do, but like the Super 8 for how expensive and difficult it is versus how well they actually do on things like YouTube and Instagram, it's a little bit painful. I'm not going to stop. It's still like not an easy thing to do.
So I wanted to say, like, that's so the thing about that, that just tells me that you're not on social media to be popular. You're on social media to share the work you create. And I really respect that a lot because I think it must be very frustrating if you're spending a lot of time and a lot of money creating like, a 3 minute film that gets in hardly any views. Like it must be frustrating. But the fact that you're still want to do it, clearly the process of the work is more important to than the reaction it gets.
Yeah, exactly. It's not. It's never for like the mass that I'm doing that sort of thing. It's never mass appeal. But for example, I remember one Reddit comment I got on one of my Carnival Super 8 videos back before I was banned from our analog. They were like, "Oh, like a Canon 5114, these are really, really good shots. It's a hard camera to use." And that one comment is like what keeps me going because it's like, thank you. Someone knows how like painfully difficult this thing is to do. Um, but that's what happens when you do a niche thing. If you buy a really nice niche old watch, it's not going to get the attention of a Rolex, but the watch enthusiast is going to see it and they'll appreciate it. And
I think
it's the same thing.
I think that's really kind of the strength of the photography community, which is why I think a lot of photographers like to talk to one another because we all appreciate how hard it is to do the craft. We all
Yeah,
appreciate like
exactly.
the time it takes, the effort it takes. It's not just a simple case of you point your camera at something, you press a button. Even though it very much is that, it's not just that. I think, there's so much time and effort that goes into creating an image, using a camera that, really just gets kind of lost in translation of you actually creating that image, which is I think is why it's really important to show the full process of taking images. Like I'm always kind of really curious, would you ever do some kind of like almost like park documentary series of you going out shooting images, like you taking images, you having an idea, like do you keep a sketchbook?
So I record voice memos
Oh,
here and there. That's yeah. So it's sort of like my. I guess it's more of a diary than anything at this point. But yeah, I would definitely do something like that because I mean, even the people close to me, not a lot of people know a lot of things about me. So uh, I don't know. It's cool to have people be able to see things. I think maybe a couple of people I know in real life might actually see this, but we'll see.
because I just think it's really interesting, and I feel like maybe the issue with photographers is that we don't show the process of the work, so therefore people don't value it because they don't see it. Like we see the final result, but we don't understand, okay, how do you get from, oh, I want to go and shoot this to, oh, I got this image? Because it's not just always a case of, oh, I want to go out and take a picture at night. Like it can be that, but it's not always that. And I feel like it's important to highlight the fact that photography is a form of art. So it just needs to be, it almost needs to be presented in the same way, but we don't present it in the same way. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that's like just the accessibility of being able to take a photo.
Yeah.
Back when Ansel Adams did it, everyone knew. And if you're taking a photo, you're using a crazy camera, and then you're developing it, and there's a lot involved. And now people have cameras on their phones, and they're very good cameras. And there are some good photographers out there that don't even think they're good. They'll post an
Oh, yeah.
Instagram story and I'll comment. It's like, hey, this is good. But because of the accessibility of having a camera on our phone, I think it's just easy to dismiss, photography in general. It's not like you can, open up your phone and draw something really, really nice. It's not quite the same. Maybe if we all had iPads with Procreate, I still don't even think that would be like the same. I don't think it would devalue or reduce the appreciation of other art forms. But yeah, I just think that's what it is. And it's also the point of entry to get into photos is realistically much easier. I think that taking photos is easier than painting.
Of course, yeah, it would be because one could argue the camera does most of the work, whereas in painting, you have to do the work to create the painting. But I don't know. I just feel like maybe we just need to maybe it's just me thinking this, but I feel like we just need to maybe reframe the way in which we think about ourselves as photographers and as artists. Because I think that plays a huge role in the way in which photography is then seen by other people. Because, I feel like if we're not kind of saying, oh, I'm an artist, or like I'm an art photographer, or like, I actually have a physical print of my work, I think people aren't going to take photography seriously as a art form.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's a really important thing that you just brought up, and I would definitely consider like other photographers artists. It's just I don't even painters I know are so reluctant to call themselves artists. I don't know. Maybe it's like a subtle imposter syndrome with the title. But yeah, I would consider art photography an art. It's just it, I don't want to say it takes less time to make a photo than a painting because it's true, but there's more to it than that. But there's a reason why a painting is going to cost you $400 or $500 at minimum, and a photo will cost you like 1/10 of that. I think we're priced accordingly for the most part. The crazy darkroom artists, like they're a lot more expensive, and I think that's justified. Also, that being said, too, sometimes like a photographer will take a photo that's just so unbelievably timeless and striking that like it would stand up to any painting of the same subject matter. So it's so dependent, I think, on the photo and the painting specifically. But I think just as a whole, society views like the time per painting rather than the timing of the photo as like a precedent for value.
But what do you think about photographers that take images which they then edit to look like paintings?
That's really cool. I love editing as an art form. Like whenever a digital photographer tries to say, oh, I just use digital, and they sort of like downplay their digital work. It's like, well, you're a digital photographer, but you're also editing. So, two different art forms. I love the different types of editing that people will do on their photos because it's an art form in itself.
So, have you ever thought about doing like a live stream of your work, of you walking around, or like anything like that, or kind of I don't know, like how because you do have a following. It might not be the largest following ever, but it's a following. Like how much do you interact with your audience?
A fair bit. I try to answer my DMs when they come in, but a good chunk of my following are people local to me.
Hmm.
A lot of friends, a lot of people that I I don't like to call my my real estate clients because we develop relationships over the course of this. Like I consider them in some capacity a friend at the very least. And some of them have found my photography page. They support it, and it's really nice. But yeah, I interact with people as much as possible. But out of that following, not a huge chunk of it is people that are just specifically interested in my photos. It's just people who know me and are like, we're like friends, so we follow each other.
That's really interesting, actually. Is that something you'd want to change, or is that something you're happy with?
I'm pretty happy with it. I like the balance right now. I actually ran a little app a while back to try and clear out the inactive accounts because I had too many bots, like that. Not bots, but like too many inactive accounts I was following, and just certain people that were just like absolutely not supporting anything I posted back. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to clear out these people. But I accidentally cleared out a lot of local people, and it's so awkward. It's so awkward, like you know seeing someone like you see all the time in person. It's like, oh no, I've unfollowed them. Oops. Because when you follow them, they get the notification.
Yeah, of
I
course.
don't know. I don't know. Like they don't take it personally, thankfully. But
I about to say, I understand what you mean because it's always like awkward, but at the same time, it's just like that's as as I said earlier, like that's the digital space is a whole different world. That's a whole different existence. They shouldn't necessarily bleed into real life. If you unfollow somebody, so what? Like you can always follow them again, or just not even that. Like just because you follow somebody doesn't mean you're paying attention to what they do. I think the term follow is just a very convenient way of supporting somebody for a second or showing somebody that, they're interested in what you do. Doesn't mean that they're actually paying attention to what you do.
yeah, I'd actually still kind of in the process of it of getting an app for photographers and artists as well, like of all kinds. I don't want it to be too niche, right? I want it to be like applicable for everyone. I won't get into that. There's a lot of
Yeah.
ideas and coding
Yeah.
and
Of
stuff
course.
involved. But one of the things I was toying with, it's not finalized. I always like to pull my Instagram to find out what people think, but putting a limit on how many people you can actually follow on these things, and like have
Yeah.
a certain space reserved for friends, but like a certain limit on the people you follow. That way, it just don't want to say gives you a convenient excuse, but it's hard when you're following 1,000 people. So many people you love to see just don't appear on your feed because you can
Yeah.
only see so many people in a day.
Absolutely. And unless you've got the time to physically go through every single person you're following and actually pay attention to that, I think it can be very hard. And actually, this is a great segue into social media, which is we're kind of already broaching the subject. So I guess the best question to ask you from that would be like, what are your thoughts on social media and how has it impacted your practice?
I think it's ultimately a very, very good thing. I've been able to get a lot of inspiration. I've been able to get a lot of very helpful advice. It's obviously helped it grow. I don't think I'm ever going to be a big account, but I mean, it's grown a bit, so I'm happy with that, and I appreciate that. And I love the connections I meet with people through things like Instagram. We've never. I always like the joke. It's like I'm quoting a tweet, so I'm quoting a tweet. It's like online friends are cool because you know our deepest traumas, but we've never seen your legs. So I love that quote. I think about it every time
It's
I
actually
talk to
so true,
anyone.
though, which is the funniest thing.
Yeah, yeah, but I love it because the connection to the community, and it's nice.
So, what kind of engagement do you actually want on social media?
People like my photos. I'm happy with people liking my photos and enjoying them, and if they want to print or whatever, like I'm pretty easy going with that stuff. The only thing I don't want is people that do the whole follow unfollow thing, just
Yeah.
because it irks me.
I know quite a few artists who are exactly the same way. They just hate it so much, and they will deliberately not follow certain accounts because they won't be followed back by that account. And I'm just like, okay, fair enough. If you want to do that, that's cool. But then again, I guess like I don't think you should necessarily tie up your a value to like the follower versus following ratio. Like I don't think it really matters. All it matters is that are you paying attention to the people you're following? Are you actually, you know, creating engagement? Are you actually kind of spending time building community? If that's what
Like
you
for
want to
me, when
do,
I
I think
originally
that's
tried
really
to
what it
clear out
should
the
be
amount of
about. It
people
shouldn't
I
be
was
about like,
following, it
oh,
wasn't for the
you've got
ratio. It was
5,000
because
followers.
it's
Why?
becoming way
Like, if
too
you want to have
overwhelming and
5,000
taxing having
followers,
all
if you
these
want to
different
follow 5,000
people up
people, like,
there and then
that's your
not
choice.
seeing certain people I wanted to see
Mm.
briefly. The ratio, I think, is like something people focus too much on.
Yeah.
Um,
So, are there any particular artists you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast in the future?
got quite a few. You ready?
Absolutely.
My favorite question. So, first one, I would definitely say Oscar Diaz. He was one of my biggest early inspirations.
Yeah.
Definitely. Instagram's been weird lately with the whether it's unarchiving stuff or earlier. Yeah, so Oscar Diaz, one of my earliest inspirations. Um, Definitely up there. Microsoft Serve. God, I forget her name every time. It's such a good Instagram name. Like you forget, but she does really really cool stuff. I think she lives in Wildwood, New Jersey, or somewhere. But really interesting. Like I would love to hear more about her job process and the editing of what she does because her photos are really cool, but like her editing is like what really really is like wow. Go more. Miles Ross actually. So he's a local photographer to me. Uh, I imagine he probably do this. I think he's like a more of like a busier guy, but um, he does like a lot of medium formats and digital, some film. But I find his quality of work is really really good, and it's got like this unique feel. He's one of those guys. You see his photo, you kind of know it's him. At least like locally. I mean, um, that's a nice one. And oh yeah, my friend too. I think my friend would do this. Uh, so is we call him Otter. Uh, his name's Brian, but he goes by Otter, and
Okay.
his Instagram is Meat Globe, and so he uses a really fancy setup, but I really like the way he shoots. So we've gone shooting at night quite a few times, uh, and what he does unique is he puts the tripod really low to the ground, which like not something you always see,
Hmm.
and it leads to a really nice perspective. But yeah, he's like just getting started. He probably do that. Let me find a couple examples. Oh, this guy, this guy is like getting really really big on YouTube. I only realized this recently. Like we've been following each other for a long time. I didn't realize how big he had grown on YouTube. Um, just as Sir. I don't know like what his actual name is. Serr. And his last name is Villasano.
Yes, that's
Pronounce that.
his video I was looking at the other day.
Yeah, so his videos are actually what inspired me to do Super 8. Like
Ah,
his
yes. I was on his channel the other day. I discovered it the other day.
gorgeous.
Yes.
Like if he's not in Hollywood in the next 5 to 10 years making movies, I'd be surprised. He's
Yeah,
so talented.
absolutely.
Uh, it's hard because like I could name all of my different photo friends, and I don't want to completely like skim over people, but I also
No,
want to give
no.
you a list of 100
Well, I'm
people.
about to say this is the thing. Just send them. Do two things. So either send them to me, or just tell them about me and get them to contact me because that's going
Yeah,
to make my life a lot easier. Because if you send people to me, that's cool. But I want people who are going to be interested. Not that I should be giving myself more work, but like
yeah,
and not just that. Like what I really hope people do is I hope people would tell other people that they think they're interested about the flying fruit bowl because like I love being sent stuff. People send me suggestions all the time, and I really enjoy it. But I also appreciate when artists, and a few people have recently reached out to me and say, "Oh, I'd love to be interviewed," because it makes me feel like, "Oh, okay, they took the time to look at it, and they took the time to listen, or they took the time to kind of consider that they'd want to be doing that." So yeah, if you have anyone you think would be, who'd like either a feature or who'd like to be interviewed, get them to send me a message. I'm always responsive as much as I can be. So yeah,
yeah. I'll DM. Like I probably got like 50 people in here. I'll DM because there's so many people who I like for their photos for so many different reasonings. I actually bought a photo book from this guy. He's a little zine. His name is Sam. His thing was Shurin Photography. He's
oh,
out of
wow.
Ohio. He's able to make some pretty mundane scenes look really cool, and that applies to me here. So, yeah. Anyways, I won't go too on about this because I could
No, it's
probably
fine.
talk for.
I'm probably going to go through your following list later. Actually, to be fair.
Yeah, yeah. Go through that. You'll
I
find
would
a lot of really, really good people in there.
Also, one thing I really want to do in the future that I said ages ago, probably said it last year, that I forgot about. Now you've just said that to me about Microsoft Serve. What I would love to do is co-hosting interviews. I think that'd be so cool. So if there's somebody that you wanted to talk to, and because I know you, that we could co-host the interview.
Yeah,
I think
I'd be
that'd be
down.
really cool. That'd be something that I'd love to do because I feel like it would give you an opportunity to actually ask the person yourself rather than ask me to ask them. Something that I would love to do. I think it'd be absolutely cool. It'd be so fun. Like,
Yeah, I would definitely be down for that.
because I feel like that'd be a cool opportunity. I don't know. I don't know. I like giving back to people. I think that'd be a really cool opportunity. If there was somebody that I was interviewing that you would be like, oh, I'd love to talk to this person. I'd be like, cool, okay, jump on the interview with me then. We'll have to arrange it in terms of questions and stuff, but I'd love to do that. I think it'd be
Yeah,
cool.
I'll give you a bunch of lists, and you can tell me which people you like the work of, and set something up.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I don't know. Like, I just want to build community. Like, I think I'm trying to figure out where I want to go forward with the Flying Fruit Bowl. I'm trying to figure out like what is going to be like the best just route to take, because like I could do this podcast for the next 10 years, you know but I don't know if that's really the best route to take, because I want to build community, and this isn't always about community because it's just me talking to one person. So I'm trying to think, how can I make it more expansive in other ways outside of the podcast, because I'll still be doing this for the next 10 years. So I don't know,
I can
like
give
I
you
want
some really good. Sorry, I can give you some
to.
good names for people that will like probably really boost the viewership. I imagine Caffeine Cowboy probably was
Yes.
quite a nice like boost.
Yeah, it was interesting because I got a few people that I already know saying to me like, oh, that's a really interesting, like a lot of people were like, oh, I can't wait for this interview, or they were like, oh, I can't wait to hear this, or they were just like, oh, that's a great opportunity. And it's cool for me because I just sent them the interview when it dropped. So I was like, if you don't see it on my feed, here's the interview. And like, I don't know, it's nice to drum up interest, but then at the same time, I'm also very much like, the viewership are going to be what the viewership are going to be. Like, I'm not out here trying to find the most popular artists to get the most views, because that's not what it's about. I don't, and it's funny, I actually never ever look at follow accounts when I interview people. I don't actually
I
care,
love that.
because at the end of the day, there are some artists that I found that have like 200 followers that are just so amazing, and they deserve the spotlight. They deserve to be shared. And I don't care if the interview gets 3 listens. That's not the point. The point is that they get a chance to talk about their work, which they wouldn't have done. I don't know, like my intentions behind the Flying Fruit Bowl are not to be popular. Like, I don't care about being popular. I care about, creating conversation. That's really what it's about, and community. That's really what it's about. So I don't know. It's an interesting.
It compares really nicely what you just said with what you're doing. So in the watch community, there's a thing called a micro brand, which is oftentimes just enthusiasts, and they're not really doing it to make a killing. They're doing it to do the craft. So I like that. It's like the watch micro brand of podcast, giving the
Yeah,
spotlight to smaller people.
because it's interesting, because when I talk to my coworkers about having a podcast, they're like, oh, how many views does it have, how many listeners does it have, how much money do you make? And when I'm just like, it's very minuscule, and they're like, oh, but don't you want to make more money? And it's like, well, not really, because money always, you always sacrifice something for money. And I feel like, yes, of course, I would love to make a living off being a podcaster. That'd be cool. If I get to talk to artists every day, that'd be awesome. But then I'd get very sick of it. So it's just like, I don't know. I'm very, very happy with what I do in the way in which I do it. And who knows what's going to happen? Like, I'm not going to do this forever. I'm not going to be doing this forever, but I enjoy it what I can. That's all I care about at the end of the day. And also, I just get to meet and talk to incredible people. I'm grateful for that. I'm extremely grateful.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's hit into the outro section, because I feel like I've kept you here way too long. So I do apologize. As long as you're okay with that, I do apologize. So I probably have maybe like 10 more questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, cool. Sorry, this has taken so long. I really do apologize. Right, let me not accidentally delete your notes. So what are the sacrifices of being an artist?
With what I do, just
Yes.
I'd say probably money over anything, just because of how inherently expensive it is for me to even find anywhere to shoot these days. But aside from money, I would say it definitely eats into my work a little bit, because a lot of times I'm going to places where I can't even answer my phone, which costs me money. Yeah, so it's all about balance. Work life, art, that sort of thing.
So my next question is actually not my question. It's from a podcast called Artsy AF run by a really cool artist called Andrew Norris. And the question is, how has art changed you over time?
It's caused me to slow down a little bit and appreciate different things, and appreciate my environment specifically. So, the little drives that I would drive through the sunset, a lot more cool now than they were 3-4 years ago.
Do you think that being an artist gives you a different perspective on the world?
Yeah, definitely. Makes you focus on the details a little bit, and makes you appreciate the beauty of different things, and Super 8 makes you appreciate, for me, the different moments, little things like, watching like, reeds blow through the wind and the waves and like all the
Oh yeah.
lines and the birds. Like it makes you appreciate the visuals.
But I'm actually really, really curious. Like, so if you're, let's just say you're just in your car driving down the street and you see like a really, really, really beautiful sunset, like, do you automatically think this will make a great image, or like, oh, I should shoot this as a video, or do you just appreciate it?
Oh yeah, I instantly pull over. Like a lot of the shots I've taken, like I'm pulling over in like the middle of dense traffic, which is legal, but like, impulsive still. I'm not doing anything like illegal or
Yeah,
sketchy or dangerous, but yeah, like a lot of my shots I'm pulling over in traffic because if you don't shoot it now, it's not going to look the
that'd be
same
cool.
in 30 minutes.
Yeah, or it'd be gone.
Yeah, and I mean, God, like I don't know, people should just shoot when you see something nice. Shoot, think later.
Oh, a question I didn't put on this list, but now you've just said that made me think. Like, is there an image you regret not taking?
Oh God, so many. Yeah, a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. Nothing specifically sticks out right now, but like for me, it's easier to just isolate like moments I just forgot to take my camera with me. Because if I have my
Oh,
camera with me, I'll take a photo every time. But yeah, definitely, definitely that.
so I have a question from the last artist I interviewed, which was actually just yesterday. Her name is Crystal Pereira, and she's actually from Canada, which is
Cool.
very, very cool. And her question for you is, if you couldn't make art anymore, what would you do?
Does music count as art?
Yeah, but let's just say, yeah, you can say music.
Okay, so if I can't do music and I can't do art and I can't do like anything related to the art field,
Yes.
well, wait, do we count cooking as art?
Well, that's the thing that I guess tricky. But let's just say visual art.
Okay, if I can do visual art, I do music. I already do music. I just don't pursue it quite as much.
Out of a very random curiosity, like what kind of music do you do? Like what part of like music do you partake in?
I listen to all kinds of different brands. Is the farthest I go into country is something like Tyler Childers, and then I'll listen to like a lot of jazz, a lot of new jazz, like Mammal Hands. Mammal Hands is always my most played. I listen to a lot of like emo type music because I used to be that. So like brand new. I know the singer's not a great dude, but the music I've listened to forever. And basically any emo band you could name, I've listened to, and a lot of metal too, like big metalhead here. But
Do you make
there's
music
not,
though?
yeah. So I don't like make music per se. Like I really get in 2018. I got more into like the theory end of music. So I learned. I did this to try and compensate because I was gonna try and like do a musical project with one of my friends. I don't know if it would be a band or whatever. And he had experience in the industry, knew what he was doing. I didn't. So I was like, all right, I'm going to learn about the theory so I can at least speak the same language. And yeah, so I did that, learn the theory, like the scales, all that sort of stuff. And we don't talk anymore, but, I'd love to really get into music more seriously. And if I do that, I would do anything from, like jazz to metal, rock. I mean, God, there's not much I wouldn't do.
So that's so the one biggest thread that I found through artists is music. Like there's so many artists I know that make music in different ways or involve music in different ways. And one thing I really want to do in the future is do an artist discussion, like have a panel discussion about the the ties between music and art. I think that'd be really great. Like to have four people who are very different, who all make music in different ways, or who are involved in music in different ways, kind of talk about that. Because I feel like there's just a really fascinating thread that I found that like almost everybody I talk to in some capacity makes music or has made music. And I feel like there's just something that we need, there's a discussion there that I feel like we need to have. I don't know, there's something fascinating about that. So,
Yeah, I love to hear what people listen to and like how they do things. I find it very fascinating.
and how it impacts your work as well. Like that's the thing. I don't know. I'm just fascinated by the fact that so many people are interested in music as well. Like art and music are so kind of aligned. It just really fascinates me. But something that I want to sort out at some point in the future. So, do you actually have a question for the next artist I interview?
Uh, you probably can't say the name, eh? But can you say like what sort of medium they use?
I don't know because I don't know exactly how I'm going to interview next. I have an idea, but I don't quite know.
Hmm, okay. What this applies? Yeah, you know what this? It's all visual art, right?
Yes.
Okay. If they had to spend 1 week in any place and they had to produce like whatever amount of work they wanted to produce in this place, what would it be? And then what would be the place that they have no inspiration to go to that is a popular destination? Like for example, for a lot of people want to go down south. I don't have any inspiration to shoot down south. Some people don't. I'm just curious to know like what people do and don't have inspiration to shoot.
Okay.
Because the first one's a common question. The second one's like the uncommon part of it.
That's a really interesting question. I'm going to yeah, definitely ask that. That's actually a really good question. See, I like the questions that people give me. I feel like I should just create interviews with everybody else's questions rather than my own. I think it would make my life so much more easier. I should just do that. I mean,
It's
I
a
have
cool
50.
format that you did.
I have like 50 of them now, so I could just do that. I mean, why am I even writing things? You know, just write everybody's questions in a list. So that's perfect. Okay, so what does it mean to be a successful artist?
So I probably wouldn't know the answer to that question. I mean, I think the simple answer is that your art is earning you enough money where you don't have to worry about other bills and you can focus on your art as much or as little as you'd like. I think that would make you pretty successful by most definitions, but I think it just depends on what people are trying to do with their art. I think if you make things that you're happy with, then you're successful to at least some degree.
So, how do you measure the success of your own work, though?
My own work, yeah, it's tough to say. I used to use sort of like just the likes or an engagement on Instagram because it was like a number that I could attach it to. But now I just basically base it on whether or not I like the photo.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's like, all right, this photo was good. This photo was not good. Sometimes I'll post a photo that I don't think was good just because it fits in the grid. But yeah, tough to gauge it.
So, in your opinion, what makes a good piece of art?
Oh, that's so tough. That's a good question. That's a very good question. Like a good piece of visual art, I would say, is something that makes someone feel a certain way. But like it could also just be something that captures people's eye. If I look at a modern painting with a bunch of colors and lines, it's probably not going to make me feel a certain way, but it's going to be really cool to look at. And I like that. And meanwhile, I don't know much about art or paintings or anything like that. But that the painting that guy did with the it's like a diner or something, and it's like you see the empty street and the people in the diner with the window, and it's
You mean Nighthawks, Edward Hopper?
yes.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, that's like a thing that makes you feel something. So I think anything that does that is very successful, very
So,
good.
yeah, I love Edward Hopper's work. It's one of my favorite painters. I actually have a book of his work over here that I actually never look at. That I should probably look at. I'm actually do that tomorrow. Um, but the next part of that question, which you kind of answered, but you can answer a different answer if you want. But like, what was the last image or the piece of media that captivated you, and what was it about it that left an impression on you?
So yeah, I just kind of got out of that slump where I didn't really I didn't look at any photos, I didn't post any photos, and take any photos. Like I was just like every part of my life I was basically disconnected from. So I would say I'd probably say it's the next thing I see. And lately I see a lot of photographers, specifically, Jason from Grainy Days mentioned that he likes to look at paintings. He likes to have paintings that inspire his work. And I'll probably do something like that.
I actually know a few artists that I think actually may like, as opposed to just photographers. If you want me to send you some over, I definitely will send you some over.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
I think there's a lot of artists that I see who I think are in very many ways more inspiring because I'm a huge fan of looking outside of your craft for inspiration. Like I think looking at films and looking at video is always helpful for photographers. And I also have a huge collection of cinematography of just images from films that I've collected over like the last 7 to 10 years. If you want a copy of that, I'm happy to send that over to you as well.
Yeah, anything you want to send would be fantastic.
Might get too much, but that's fine. I'll send you a bunch of stuff just because I love sending stuff to people, as you probably can imagine. And yeah, I'll send you a bunch of stuff. I think you'd really appreciate it, or like, I don't know, it could help you in some way. And And same here as well. If there's anything you want to send me, just send it to me at any time. I'm always interested to see new stuff and be informed about new things. So two more questions. So what would your younger self think about your work?
That's a good question. One of my biggest regrets in life was not getting into photography at a much younger age. And you'd asked me a question too, what photo do I regret not taking?
Yeah.
I just remembered. It was before I even thought of picking up a camera. I was 14. I used to work at a place called Crystal Palace. During this period of time, we had Crystal Palace, which was like your typical like 90s, early 2000s time capsule indoor amusement park in a small city, which that sounds painfully niche, but yeah, I really regret not getting all the photos of that because I think about them all the time, like the still images in my head of what that place is like, and even the smell. I remember the smell. And then there's another spot, Highfield Square, which I never actually went into, but it was a dead mall that got demolished in I think 2014. And I still kicking myself for not being able to shoot the inside of that. That's painful. Yeah. But my younger self, with the photos looking forward, I mean, I'd probably think it was pretty neat, and it probably would have inspired me and changed a lot of my life if I had got into it back then.
I know I said two more questions, but I'm still have a random one to ask you. Is like how often do you shoot interiors, and is that something you want to shoot more of? Like in terms of just like outside of malls, for instance.
Yeah, interiors I love doing. The only thing that ever like really makes it difficult is the lighting because film is so like I can have a digital camera and shoot in a dimly lit bar and get a good photo, but I can shoot with an 800 speed film and I can push it two full stops, and I still am unlikely to get anything within that tiny bar because like pushing film is not quite the same as like shooting at a higher ISO.
Oh yeah,
like,
of course, yeah.
yeah, so it's you did. I don't know why I'm explaining this to you.
Yeah,
You
no,
did
no, no.
that.
I know, of course, because with a digital camera, you can just bump with the ISO. It's not going to give you the best effects, but there's always an option.
Yeah, you'll at least see something. So yeah, I'd love to shoot interiors, but with that, I'd need some lighting, which would mean I'd lose some of the spontaneous nature. I would need the right lighting or a tripod to do it, and I would definitely do more of it if I could. Architecture is a lot of the time inside for me too.
Yeah, because I'd love to get into shooting more interiors. It's just finding the places, and it's also getting permission. I think a lot of here in the UK, like here in the UK, like the city centre where I live, like I actually have to ask permission to shoot in the city centre, which makes no sense because it's a public space.
Don't hear an unethical tip.
Yeah,
it's actually not unethical. It's just a good tip that photographers can use. So I shoot a lot of dead malls with a lot of security guards, and they don't like it when you walk through the mall and take photos and do nothing. So wear like I have a black bomber jacket that looks like very like plain looking, and I'll sometimes wear a dress shirt underneath, not tucked in, just your typical button up, and I'll put like a lanyard with a little plastic thing at the ends, and it'll just be my face, and I'll just put some random writing. It can be anything. They're not going to read it, and the whole idea is just so that they think you're like a visitor. And even if I don't have the thing on me, if they come up and say, "What are you doing?" I say, "Oh, I'm a photographer." You open up CBC, look at my whatever. Yeah. But you don't have to have like the news article to show them. That's just easy because it's Canada. Just show them your Instagram page. Like, oh, I'm doing this for documentary purposes. And if you're young, you can always just say, "Hey, like I'm a student photographer." All those things, they'll probably leave you alone.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good idea, actually, just because I think the one annoying thing about being a photographer is being stopped or being questioned or being asked why you're doing it when you just want to get on with it. Like, it's pretty frustrating because, you go to a place to shoot images because you can. And it's like people want to know what you're doing, people want to stop you, people want, it can be annoying sometimes because you just want to create. So that's good advice, actually. I'm going to definitely take that on board. And also, just before I ask you the last question, I want to quickly say, like, I actually read that article about the Dead Mall series, and it was actually really inspiring. Like, it's actually really made me think about kind of what nostalgia means to me and where I can go and shoot and the kind of stuff I want to create. So I have to thank you a lot because it definitely really gave me a lot of motivation. Just talking to you, like the very first moment we spoke, it gave me a lot of motivation. I told you that. I think I've already messaged you saying that, but it actually really did motivate me to go out and shoot more work. So I have to really thank you a lot. Yes.
So, I remember.
So I really appreciate it. Like, thank you very much.
Oh,
it's super cool.
A lot of that too is the interviewer with CBC Arts. forget her name, but she asked really good questions, and she had a lot of really good insight. I want to say she had a photography or an art background, but she definitely like talked the talk and knew what she was talking about. It's very nice to speak to someone that has that background.
Of course, because they make you feel comfortable. They're not just asking you to interview because it's their job. They're asking you because they're actually interested. That's the thing. There's a difference between being asked a question to be asked, and there's interest, or to be asked a question because they actually want to know the answer. That's the thing. But,
yeah, exactly.
Anyway, the last question, double barrel question, which is, what are you currently working on, and where can people find more about you and your work?
So the best place to find me, my Instagram, ry_ta. Right now, there's not a link, but there's usually a link at the bottom for Linktree that links to all my other social medias and stuff.
Yes.
Don't have a website at this time, but I will eventually. Once that's up, it'll be on the Linktree as well. So Instagram's the best spot. And currently working on a couple of different photo books, I guess, but these are long time in production. So those will probably not be ready for another while. And Super 8 Seasons, which will be on YouTube, I guess, just short little 3-minute clips. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for your time, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
That concludes the last and final part of my conversation with photographer Ryan Taylor. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments about it, please send me an email at theflyingfruitbowl@gmail.com, or please get in touch via social media sites such as Instagram and Twitter. The Flying Fruit Bowl podcast can now be found on a variety of sites such as Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. If you like the show, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing, or subscribing on any of those platforms to help spread the word and garner more attention. Also, please don't forget to check out theflyingfruitbowl.co.uk for daily inspiration and written interviews. And if you're a creative, please get in touch for a chance to be featured or interviewed. We now also have a Patreon page if you'd like to support the platform further. Tiers start from £1, and more information can be found over at patreon.com/theflyingfruitbowl. Additionally, we also have a PayPal if monthly donations are not your thing. If you'd like to donate to the Flying Fruit Bowl, I should include a link to our PayPal in the show notes. Once again, thank you very much for listening to the episode today. Until next time, folks, please stay safe.